My daughter called me on a Tuesday morning, which should have told me something right there. She never calls on weekdays. She texts, maybe, if she needs something. But a call, on a Tuesday, before 9, I picked up thinking something had happened. Something had happened, all right. "Dad," she said, and I could hear her fiancé's voice in the background even then, coaching her from the other room. "We've been talking, and we think it's better if you don't come to the wedding." I stood there in my kitchen in Orangeville. The coffee maker was still going. The radio had the weather on, partly cloudy, high of 14. I remember all of that, strange as it sounds, because my brain went somewhere else while she kept talking. Something about the venue being small. Something about guest lists and difficult decisions. Something about how her fiancé's family was large and there just wasn't room. I have one daughter, one child. Her mother passed 8 years ago, and since then it has just been the two of us, or so I thought. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I said, "Okay," and I hung up the phone, and I stood there looking at the coffee maker until the cycle finished and the little orange light went off. 3 days later, a registered envelope arrived at my door. Inside was a printed document, 4 pages, itemized. Catering deposit, venue rental, floral arrangements, photographer, hair and makeup, rehearsal dinner at a steakhouse on King Street, honeymoon package, 2 weeks in Portugal and Spain. The total at the bottom in bold, $178,000. And underneath, handwritten in my daughter's fiancé's handwriting. I recognized it from the birthday card he'd signed 2 years ago, the only one he'd ever sent, a single line. "We know you want what's best for Ivy. This is your chance to show it." Ivy, my daughter, my only child who I raised alone after her mother got sick, who I drove to swim practice at 5:30 in the morning every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 years, who I helped move into 4 different apartments, whose tuition I paid, completely, because I didn't want her starting her adult life underwater. That same daughter had just sent me a bill for $178,000 and told me not to show my face at her wedding. I put the document on my kitchen table and sat down across from it, the way you might sit down across from someone you need to think carefully about before you speak. My neighbor, an old retired school teacher named, well, she'd kill me if I used her name. She came over that afternoon and I showed her. She read through it slowly, turned the last page over, looked at the back as if there might be something there, then set it down. "Clyde," she said. "That's me. Clyde Marchetti, 63 years old, retired civil engineer, widower." "Clyde," she said again. "You're not going to pay this, I know," I said. "But you're not going to do nothing either." She was right about that. Let me back up because this didn't come from nowhere. These things never do. My daughter Ivy is 31. She's smart, genuinely smart. She got her mother's mind, and I used to think her mother's heart. She works in communications for a tech firm in Toronto. She met her fiancé, a man I'll call Preston. Not his real name, but the kind of name that fits him. At a rooftop party 3 years ago, and within 4 months she had changed her profile photo, changed her phone plan, changed her apartment, and, slowly, changed herself. Preston comes from money. Not old money, not the kind that teaches you anything. New money, the kind that makes you feel like the rules were always meant to bend around you. His father owns several commercial properties in Mississauga. His mother hasn't worked in 20 years, but talks about her projects, the way people talk about careers. The first time I met them, at a dinner Ivy arranged at a restaurant in Yorkville, his mother spent 40 minutes explaining the renovations on their Muskoka cottage and then asked me, with genuine curiosity, what I'd done before I retired. I told her I was a civil engineer. She nodded the way you nod when someone tells you something that doesn't require further thought. Preston himself was polite, in the way that takes effort. You could see the calculation behind it. He shook my hand, asked a few questions, and then spent the rest of the dinner talking to his father. Ivy watched him the whole time, not me, him, like she was reading the room through his eyes. I drove home that night on the 400 and I thought, this is a man who has decided what kind of life he's going to have, and he has decided Ivy fits into it, and the only question now is what else does and doesn't. I was right about that, too. I just didn't know how right for another 2.5 years. The engagement came last spring. Ivy called me, again on a weekday but evening, so I thought it was normal, and said they were engaged, and could I please not make a big deal about it, because Preston's family was already planning a large celebration, and she didn't want things to overlap. I congratulated her. I asked if I could take her to dinner, just the two of us. She said she'd check her schedule and text me. She texted me 3 weeks later. We had dinner at a Thai place near her apartment. She showed me the ring. I said it was beautiful because it was. I asked if she was happy. She said, of course. I asked how I could help with the wedding, and she said they had it handled. Preston's mother had already connected with the venue coordinator, and they had a vision. A vision, I said. Yes, she said, and something in her face went careful. It's going to be very elegant. Very curated. I didn't ask what that meant in terms of my attendance. I should have. I assumed, because I am her father, and because that is a reasonable assumption to make, that I would be walking her down the aisle. I was not walked anywhere into my thinking. Over the following months, whenever I asked about the wedding, Ivy would give me short answers. They were using a venue in Prince Edward County, very beautiful, very exclusive. The guest list was complicated because Preston had a large extended family, and they were trying to keep things manageable. When I offered to contribute financially, she said they were fine, they had it covered. Then she called on a Tuesday morning and told me not to come. And then the bill arrived. Now here is something I want to say clearly, because I know how these stories can read. I am not a wealthy man in the way Preston's family is wealthy, but I am not a poor man either. I worked for 35 years. I paid off my house in Orangeville. I have savings. I have a pension. I put money away for Ivy her entire childhood, and when she finished university, I gave her what was left in that account, about $42,000, to help her get started. Preston's family knew this. I don't know exactly how they knew, but they did. People like that always find out. At some point, someone ran some numbers and decided I had enough to be useful. What I did not have was $178,000 sitting around for a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend. What I also did not have was any intention of letting this pass. The day after the envelope arrived, I called my lawyer. I've used the same lawyer for 20 years, a man named, I'll leave his name out, he's a private person, but he's thorough and plain-spoken and he doesn't let people walk on you. I explained the situation. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciate about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. This document has no legal standing, he said. You're not a party to any wedding contract. You didn't sign anything. You have no obligation. I know, I said, but I want to understand what I can do. About the bill, nothing to do. Ignore it. About everything else. Another pause. Tell me about your estate planning. That's where it started. My wife and I had set up a joint will years ago. After she passed, I updated it. Everything was going to Ivy, the house, the savings, the pension proceeds, all of it. It was never a question in my mind. She was my child. That's what you do. My lawyer walked me through what an updated trust structure would look like. Not cutting Ivy out. That wasn't my goal, and I want to be clear about that. My goal was to make sure that if I left her anything, it went to her, not to a household I had been formally excluded from. The house could go into trust with conditions. The liquid assets could be structured differently. It's your money, my lawyer said. You earned it. You decide. I spent about 2 weeks thinking. I went for a lot of walks. I have a trail behind my house that goes along the Credit River, and I walked it every morning and most evenings, and I thought about Ivy at 7 years old, asking me to teach her to ride a bike. I thought about Ivy at 16, crying after a swim meet she didn't place in, saying she wanted to quit, and me sitting on the end of her bed for 2 hours talking her through it. I thought about Ivy at 22, calling me from her first apartment at midnight because a pipe had burst and she didn't know what to do, and me driving 40 minutes in the rain to help her deal with it. And I thought about Ivy at 31, letting someone else put my name on a bill and hand it to me like a tab at a bar. I called my lawyer back and told him what I wanted to do. The wedding was in September, on a Saturday. Prince Edward County, as advertised, is beautiful in September. I know this because I've been there. I've driven through Picton on road trips. I was not there for the wedding. I spent that Saturday doing what I usually do on Saturdays. I drove to the farmer's market in town, bought some squash and a jar of local honey, had a coffee at the place on the main street where you can sit outside even in September if you've got a jacket. I came home, made lunch, watched a game. My neighbor came over around 4 and we played cards. She asked me how I was doing. I said I was fine, which was mostly true and also not true at all. Do you think she's happy? My neighbor asked. I think she thinks she is, I said. We played another hand. Outside the window, the maples were starting to turn. I didn't hear from Ivy directly for 11 days. Then she called, and she sounded different, tight, like someone choosing each word before it went out. How are you, Dad? Fine, I said. How was the wedding? It was beautiful. Good, I said. I'm glad. A silence. Dad, we need to talk about something. Here it was. Preston's family is saying that you never responded to the invoice. They're saying it's been more than 30 days, and they need to know your intentions. Your intention. Like I had applied for something. My intentions, I said, are the same as they've always been. I love you. I want what's good for you. I didn't sign any contract for a wedding I wasn't invited to, and I won't be paying for one. Silence again. Dad, they're not asking for charity. This was an agreement. I didn't make any agreement, Ivy. Well, her voice shifted slightly. The careful choosing stopped for a moment, and something else came through, something younger and more familiar. They're saying they might take legal action. Let them, I said. Another silence, longer. Dad, Ivy, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it as coming from someone who loves you very much. I changed my will last month. Not to punish you. I need you to understand that. But I spoke with my lawyer, and I put some protections in place. The house and the majority of my estate are in trust now, with conditions, and the conditions exist to make sure that whatever I leave eventually goes to you and not to people who see me as a line item. I heard her breath, just a small sound. I'm not going anywhere soon, I said. I hope. But when I do, I want what I built to land where I intended. I've been your father for 31 years. I drove you to swim practice in the dark. I sat with your mother when she was dying, and I made her a promise that I would always be there for you. I intend to keep that promise. But this is not what being there for you looks like. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I didn't know he was going to send that, Dad. Her voice was quieter now. The invoice. I didn't know he was going to write that. I believe you, I said, and I did, partly. I believed she didn't write it. I wasn't sure she'd done enough to stop it. His mother is. She had a very specific idea of what everything should look like, and when you weren't, she stopped. When I wasn't what? Participating. There it was. His mother believed, I said slowly, that I would pay for a wedding I wasn't invited to because I would be too afraid of losing you to say no, if he didn't answer. That's what happened, isn't it? A long pause. I'm sorry, Dad. Preston's family did consult a lawyer. I know, because my lawyer received a letter about 4 weeks after the wedding, outlining the alleged verbal agreement, which did not exist, and the emotional distress caused by my failure to contribute, which was creative, and the impact on the newlyweds' financial planning. My lawyer sent back 2 paragraphs that were, from his telling, extremely clear about where things stood. Nothing further came of it. What did come, about 2 months after the wedding, was a phone call from Ivy. Not about money this time, not about any invoice. She called on a Sunday evening, and she was crying, and she said she needed to talk. We talked for 2 hours. I won't put all of it here. Some of it isn't mine to share, and some of it is still working itself out. What I will say is that she told me things about the past year that I hadn't known, and that explained certain things without excusing them. She told me that she had felt, in the middle of the planning, like she was standing between 2 worlds and couldn't figure out how to hold both. She told me that she had said things she didn't mean and failed to say things she should have. She told me that when his mother drafted that invoice, she had sat in their kitchen and cried, and Preston had told her it was the practical thing to do and that I would understand. I did not understand, but I began to understand Ivy a little better. We didn't fix everything that night. You don't fix 31 years in 2 hours, especially not the last 3. But something shifted. Something that had been locked up came open a little. In February, Ivy drove up to Orangeville on a Saturday. She brought scones from a bakery I like in Caledon, which told me she'd been thinking about it in advance, and that meant something. We had coffee at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd set that invoice down and sat across from it. She told me that things had been harder than she'd expected, that Preston's family had opinions about everything all the time, and that she had been managing those opinions for 3 years, and she was tired. She didn't say anything was wrong with her marriage directly, but she said she missed being herself. You can always be yourself with me, I said. That never changed. She looked at me, and for a moment she looked like she was 16 again, after the swim meet, sitting on the edge of the bed. I know, she said. I told her about the trust. I walked her through what I'd done and why, not as a lecture but as an explanation. She listened, she didn't argue. At the end she nodded and said, "That makes sense, Dad." "It's not permanent," I said. "Things can change if things change." "I know," she said again. Before she left, she hugged me in the driveway, which she hadn't done in a long time, longer than I realized until she did it. I stood there in my driveway in February in Orangeville, with the snow coming down light and dry the way it does here in the winter, and I held on to my daughter for a little longer than I probably needed to. I'm not going to tell you this story has a clean ending, because it doesn't. Life doesn't work that way, not at 63, not at any age. Ivy and I are talking more regularly. We had dinner together in March, just the two of us, at that same Thai place near her apartment, and it felt not exactly like before, but like something honest, something true. Preston's family has not contacted me again. My will remains as I've written it. My lawyer has the documents. My neighbor knows where they are, just in case. What I know is this. There is a version of me that would have written that check. That would have swallowed everything. The insult, the exclusion, the invoice, all of it, because I was afraid that not writing it meant losing my daughter. And I understand that impulse, I do. I was that man for a moment when I read the note at the bottom of those 4 pages. We know you want what's best for Ivy. This is your chance to show it. But this was not the chance to show it. The chance to show it was every morning I got up before sunrise and drove through dark streets to a pool. The chance to show it was sitting beside my wife in the hospital and making her that promise. The chance to show it was all the quiet, unremarkable, invisible work of being someone's father. Writing a check to people who told me not to come would not have been love. It would have been fear dressed up as love. And my daughter deserves better than that. She deserves a father who knows the difference. I think she's starting to see that. I think she's starting to find her way back to herself, one step at a time. And I intend to be here when she does. The coffee maker goes off every morning at 7. The light on the river trail is something else in October. I am 63 years old, and I am, for the most part, all right. That has to count for something.